Do you ever find yourself in bed late at night, unable to sleep, tossing and turning because the beautiful digitally shot footage on your Blackmagic cameras or your Canons or your Sonys, it looks lovely, but it just doesn't look cinematic enough? And there you are, thinking about different things you could try. Maybe LUTs, maybe some film LUTs are the answer. Maybe you just need to bring in the brights, bring up the lows, you know, push the blue and the green at the bottom end and the red at the top end, and that will look cinematic. But no, it never quite looks right. Well, that's my story. Until now. I got an email the other day from a company called Dehancer, and they said, why not try our film emulation plugin? And I thought, you know what, I'll give it a go. So they sent me a month's license and said, try it out, tell us what you think. And I thought, you know what, I'll do a review. So to cut a long story short, it's really good. And I mean really good. But it does have its flaws, mostly in its layout and UI. And I hope to highlight some of those things in this video. And maybe they'll watch it and maybe they'll listen. Who knows? Anyway, let's dive in. Okay, I've got 4 clips here of the Australian Pink Floyd Show. I did some filming on our last UK tour, and this stuff was shot on my Blackmagic 6K Pros and my new Blackmagic Ursa Mini 12K. So the footage has got nothing on it at the moment. I just rendered out 4 clips to play with. And let's start by just adding the Blackmagic LUT. So I'm going to start with this clip here. And I'm going to turn on the Blackmagic LUT, and that will give you a look of what it was like in the room. Now I've got an exposure node before that, which just brightens it up a bit. So as you can see, that's what I've got directly out of the camera. Now what I want to do is I want to introduce the Dehancer plugin. And at the moment, I've got an instance of Dehancer Pro 6.2 with nothing switched on. So you can see if I switch that on and off, nothing's going to happen. And we'll start from the top. So instead of using the Blackmagic LUT, I can just use Dehancer to bring it into the correct color space. So I can go down to here and say choose camera. And I can go to the vendor, Blackmagic, and I can select my camera. Now it doesn't have the 12K listed, but if I use the 6K, it seems to work quite nicely. I'm using Film Gen 5, ISO 400, I think it was actually 800, but whatever, that looks fine. I've got that bit of exposure boost there, so that will do wonders to that. And you can see there's not a lot of difference between having it like that or having it like that. I think one is there's tiny differences, but nothing that I'm worried about. So with this, I can change the exposure, I can change the temperature and the tint, and we've also got defringe, which I'm not going to use. There's some basic settings there. But the first one that I actually want to spend any time on is the film section here, which is basically what film print you're looking for. So as you can see, if I enable that, it gives me the Kodak Vision 3 250D film print. And the second thing, which kind of work in tandem, or at least they do in my workflow, is the print down here, which is set to linear. But usually I set this to either Fujifilm or Kodak. And I like to have the analog range limiter enabled. So as you can see, Kodak, if I go from linear to Kodak, that film print emulation, I mean, that's actually doing a huge amount of the work. The Fujifilm is slightly different, a little bit more blue and slightly brighter. I'm going to stick with the Kodak for now. And as you can see, we've got all these different film profiles here. So if I enable that, you can see the Vision 3 250D has been added, and that working with the print looks really, really nice. But there's a lot of them. Now this video is about how good this plugin is, but there are a couple of things that I'd like it to have that it doesn't have, particularly in the way that you pick the film profile. So it's in this list here, which I find quite annoying because you've got to click on one of them and then click on another one. Even if you use your arrow keys, it doesn't scroll through them. You've got to click on each one and go through. So I used a really useful function that's at the bottom, which actually exports the LUTs. You can export up to a 33.3D LUT. So I used that and actually exported every single one of the LUT combinations of the film with the 2 different prints with the Kodak and the Fujifilm. And I did this and wrote my own little tool so that I could actually pick what film print and what profile I wanted to use. Because the thing is, there's 63 different film profiles, which is great. And then there's the 2 print profiles that I'm interested in, which is the Fuji one and the Kodak one. So together, that makes 126 different combinations. And it's a real pain to go through with your mouse and select each one and look. And then by the time you've found the next one, you've forgotten what the other one was like. So I wrote this little JavaScript HTML app, which basically allowed me to pick between a pair and say which one I preferred. And it narrowed down my choice. And then at the end, told me which one was best. Now, I'd love to be able to publish this and put it on the web, but it does actually use the LUTs that you export. And for copyright reasons, I can't just give away the LUTs that I've exported from Dehancer. But I will put the code to the app up on GitHub, and then you can generate your own LUTs and populate the folder and then do your own choices. Because it's a lot of different choices to go through, and you really need some sort of way of comparing them. And having them in a list like that, to me, is just not the best way to do it. After some selection and going through using my little tool, I found out that my favorite one for this particular shot is the Kodak Vision 3 250D. And actually it was with the Fuji print, which that's the one I selected. I'm not sure actually, I quite like it with the Kodak print, but you can see straight away that just looks absolutely stunning. If I make a second version of this grade, I'm going to turn off Dehancer and turn on the Blackmagic LUT. So that's what it is straight out the camera, and this is what it is with Dehancer. And you can see it's really doing some beautiful things to the colors there. Now, once I've got that, the next place I'm going to go to is the expand section, where if I enable that, you can bring up and down the black point. So you can see that's bringing it up and down. 2 little levels up, so the bottom's sitting about there, which is nice. And again, the white point seems pretty good. I can brighten it up a touch, but it will get brighter. And as you can see there, it really does saturate there, but that's the lights blowing out. I don't mind it blowing it out. It looks pretty cool. So if I play that through now, I mean, that's looking pretty beautiful in my eyes straight away. And if I compare it with what it was directly out the camera, I mean, that does look nice, and with a bit of contrast, it could look really beautiful. But with Dehancer, that just looks stunning. And I could play with it a bit more. I could go to the print here and put in some tonal contrast, which really could bring out some, I don't know, some real beautiful film contrast. That's the kind of thing. I mean, that's right up there, but maybe back it off a bit. And then adjust the black and the white points to make sure that I'm not losing all that stuff at the bottom and not blowing out the top too much. That's looking really nice. Maybe I need to bring down the exposure into it here to save some of those highlights. You can see you can do so much with this and make it look really nice, style it in any way you want. Okay, so that is looking really, really gorgeous. Let's go to another clip. So I've got a clip here. I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to put on that exposure node at the beginning. I'm not going to put on the LUT. I'm going to go straight to Dehancer here. Nothing's turned on in Dehancer in this one, so I'm going to go to the film area, enable that, and I'm also going to enable the print. I'm going to put the print onto Kodak, put the analog range limiter on as well. And I'm just going to set up the camera here. So I'm going to choose the camera, again, Blackmagic Design. I'm going to use the 6K profile with the Gen 5 ISO 400. Watch that come to life straight away. I'm going to show you another couple of my favorite film profiles. Down in the Fujifilm area, there's one that's called a Natura 1600. That looks absolutely stunning. I'm a big fan of that. And also the Superior 1600, which is almost the same, just slightly, there's a little bit more brightness in the mids. Also this one here, the Fujifilm Instax Digital Intermediate. I mean, that tends to take things a little bit purple. It makes the blues a little bit purple, but I think that looks stunning as well. And depending on what you're doing, if you're not looking for a natural color look, that can work really well. So on this shot, I'm going to go for the Fuji color Natura 1600. So the next thing I want to look at here is the color head. Now the color head's really interesting. I'll turn it on because you can change the color of the look. So we could move it all towards the yellows if I wanted to, and move it all towards the blues if I wanted to do that. I'll reset that, and we've got magenta and green, and we've got cyan and red. And of course we can use them in combination. I can click on gang as well and bring them all one way or all another. I mean, that looks really, really nice. If I was to do that and do that, that looks even a little bit more natural. So if I bring the top towards the cyan and then maybe bring that towards the magenta, but then move that towards the blue. Now that's an interesting look. So you can do loads of stuff with the with those controls there. But these are my favorite down here: the shadows tone, the mid-tones tone, and the highlights tone. So the shadows, as it says, is just working on the shadows, the low end of the image. So if I move that to there, you can see that's making the image more blue, or if I move it up to there, it's making it look a little bit more orange. So you could really bring those shadows down, bring the mid-tones towards the orange or towards the blue. I'd keep them in the middle and maybe just move the highlights towards the orange, but maybe not that much, you know, do something like that. Maybe bring the mid-tones down towards the blue. So that's really done some beautiful things to it. If I move on to the film grain, now the film grain should really win some awards, because I think this is possibly the best film grain emulation that I've ever seen. I'm going to turn the film resolution right up so we're getting the full 4K film. And if I go full screen, now I don't know whether you're going to be able to see this on YouTube, because YouTube their compression tends to get rid of all the details. But I'm hoping if I leave it on there long enough, YouTube might be able to keep the detail. Now, if I turn it right up so you can see how fine the grain is there, and you can see the look of it. I mean, obviously that's way too much, but you can see it's not just like overlaying some random noise, which is what a lot of people do. It's really creating grain based on what the underlying pixel colors are, which looks absolutely gorgeous. And you can turn the amount right down to 0, and still there's a tiny bit of grain, which to me is just enough to give it just a little bit of sparkle, a little bit of edge. You've got this film type, either negative or positive, which changes how the grain interacts with the footage, and the mode I'm keeping in analog. Digital is there, but it says experimental, so I'm not going to try that at the moment. I just think this looks beautiful, even with the film resolution right up and the amount right down. The tiniest amount just adds that little extra something to the footage, and stops it looking so clean and digital, because of course we capture this stuff in 6K or 12K, and it looks stunning and it's so perfect, but we haven't grown up watching films and going, oh my god, that looks so perfect. It's actually the rough edges that we've enjoyed in these old movies, and they have character to them, and this plugin is really adding some of that character back in that we miss from using beautiful digitally perfect cameras. So I've got another clip here, and just to show you what it's like when you're using Dehancer with something that's already in the 709 color space, I'm going to leave the Blackmagic LUT on. I've got a tiny little exposure correction there, which is just bringing up some of the shadows. So I'm going to go to Dehancer here. Again, nothing is turned on at the moment, and the source is just saying 709, so I'm not going to choose the camera. I'm using the Blackmagic LUT before to do the color space transform. So we're just going to go to the film profile, and on this one, let's have a look. If I put on the Kodak 250D and I go down to the print and I make this the Kodak print here, what does that look like? Now that immediately looks good to me. If I change it, another one that I really like is the 50D, which looks a bit more milky and washed out. But that's, that is characteristic of a lot of film. And to me, on a long shot like this, where you want to see the crowd down here, you don't want them to just disappear into black, which is very easy to happen. You see, you turn that off and there's a lot of darkness down here. And again, that's just giving the crowd some color and actually making them part of the shot. So sometimes having a slightly more milky profile can look really nice. If it's a bit too milky, you can go to the print here, and I could up some tonal contrast, which obviously just immediately undoes all that, the reason that we chose that particular film print. To be honest, I think that looks really, really nice. If I go to film grain, I'm just going to turn the amount down to nothing, the film resolution up, and enable it. Again, if I go full screen on there, in fact, let me get right in. So let's zoom in on this footage and see what it's actually doing, the film grain's actually doing. I'm going to go to 300%, and you can see there, hopefully in YouTube, you can see the grain there. If I turn it on and off, you can see what it's, I mean, that's amount 0. If I turn it right up, you can see it's adding loads. But if I turn it down to 0, there's still a tiny amount. And if I switch it from negative to positive, it's even more subtle. So if it's too much even at 0 with the negative, it becomes even more subtle using positive. But you can see that's just adding in a tiny bit of noise, but it's sort of not just random noise, it's intelligent noise based on the underlying colors of the pixels that it's actually affecting, and it looks really nice. If we zoom back out, I don't want to pixel peak. If you zoom back out and just disable it and enable it, I mean, I can see this on my screen, and it's adding so much to the image. So I mean, the difference between that, which is what came directly out the camera, and then that, which to me just looks, I mean, that just looks gorgeous. Dehancer's really doing some beautiful things there. And again, we could come down to the color head. I could enable that. I could take the shadows towards the blue. I could take the mid-tones down a little bit towards the blue, and then the highlights up towards the yellow if I wanted to do that. Probably a bit too much film grain on that now. I'm going to turn the amount back down to 0. So in this video, I really wanted to go over the bits of the plugin that I will actually be using personally for what I do. There are many other things in it. There's halation, there's bloom, there's vignette, there's film breath, there's gate weave, and of course there's the ability to generate your own LUTs, which is fantastic, and I will go over those in another video. But in this video, I just wanted to show you what I'm using since I've had the plugin, and you know, how it's improved footage that I'm actually using in a real world situation. So let's summarize here. I think the film profiles and the prints are absolutely amazing. I think the film grain should win awards because I think that's some of the best grain emulation that I've seen. Those features on it, I think, make this plugin absolutely amazing. Now, the downsides for me, there's a few downsides. One thing that I don't like is that it's all stacked on top of each other. Part of the workflow in Davinci Resolve is using nodes and having different bits on nodes. So I'd like to be able to, for example, have the input transform on one node, and then the film profile on another node, and then the film print on another node, and then the grain on another node. And at the moment it's all in one. And if I run multiple instances of the plugin, even with everything switched off, it is actually still using some processing power, which means that I can't put 6 instances on without just slowing everything down and then just using one little bit from each. So I'd really like it if you installed Dehancer Pro to have not only the all-in-one plugin, but then have all the separate bits of the plugin. You see, if I wanted to have the film profile on one node and then the film print on another node, and then I wanted to do something in between, let's say contrast, but I wanted to use the Davinci Resolve HDR tools, let's say, and I wanted to do something there in between the two. I can't do that at the moment without running 2 complete instances of the full plugin, which I'd really like to see that be an option. And also I'd really like to see some sort of visual feedback for the film profiles, because having them all in a list like that, unless you really go through them and then you start to learn which ones you like, or you do what I did and write some sort of comparison app where you can actually go through, put your own picture in and apply the LUT, that's a real downer for me, because the profiles look so beautiful, and I know that most people will go in there and just be confronted by a list that big and find one or two that they like, and then they'll never look beyond that, and then they're missing out on the fact that each individual film that you make, you know, can have its own, or each individual scene can have its own characteristics, and unless you know fully what's out there and you can quickly preview and go, do I want this one, do I want this one, do I want this one, I think some of the magic is lost just having them in a boring list like that. Using this all in a list like this with all these, you know, sort of accordion boxes, it does make me feel like I'm back in Premiere Pro territory. So I'd really like the Resolve version of Dehancer Pro to kind of fit the workflow of a Davinci Resolve user, if that makes sense. Those criticisms aside, this is such a good plugin. The results speak for themselves. I mean, taking an image and taking it from this to this, I mean, what a plugin. Congratulations to them for doing such a good job. And I you know, if you watch the videos on their website where they go through how they do the film prints and the meticulous detail that they're going to do to make these profiles, I mean, it is really something, and they do look stunning. They haven't sponsored this. They haven't told me what to say. If I thought it was rubbish, I'd tell you it was rubbish. Obviously, I don't think it's rubbish. I think it's amazing. They have given me an affiliate code. So if you want to go to their website and buy it, you can use the code DDF. It's my initials, David Dominic Fowler, DDF, and you will get 10% off. I was happy to try it out. They emailed me and it was a real world problem that I was actually trying to solve. And I think it has solved it. I think the results are stunning. So if you like it and you want to buy it, you can use my code. But more importantly than that, I'd love it if you shared this video, you liked it, you leave me a comment. And I will be back with a couple more videos on Dehancer. We're going to go through some of those other things. And I'm also going to do a full song where I take one of the Australian Pink Floyd Show songs and I sync it up and I do a bit of an edit, and I'm going to use Dehancer in that. So there will be some more videos featuring Dehancer coming up. And if you didn't check it out, I did a very, very short film of me making a cup of tea the other night just because I wanted some test footage to play about with it, and I used Dehancer on that as well. And there's something sort of, is it ASMR or ASMR about it, where I watch it and it just makes me want to have a cup of tea and I almost feel like I'm there. So if you want to watch a really random video of me making a cup of tea that's been color graded using the Dehancer plugin and filmed on one of my 6K Pro, my Blackmagic 6K Pro cameras in my kitchen at 2 in the morning the other night, then go ahead and watch that. There'll be a link on the screen above somewhere here or whatever. So thank you for watching this video. Please like, please subscribe, please leave me a comment, and I will see you again soon. Goodbye.